Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio Story 2.
Imagine the consequence for a minor social transgression isn't a parking ticket or a stern talking to.
Right.
Imagine the consequence is waking up completely blind, experiencing just like gruesome medical body horror, and eventually realizing that microscopic talking roommates have moved into your eyeballs.
Yeah, that would definitely make you reconsider how you look at people on the street.
That's the understatement of the century, honestly.
Mm.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are immersing ourselves in a truly bizarre, brilliantly unsettling 17th century Chinese supernatural tale.
And our source material for this is an excerpt from the classic text Liao Zaizi.
Right, which translates to Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio. Specifically, we're looking at a story called The Talking Pupils, which was written by Pu Songling.
Exactly. And Pu Songling compiled these stories as a way to blend the supernatural with, well, very pointed social and moral commentary. He used ghosts, fox spirits, and in this case,
Sentient body parts.
like sentient body parts to expose the hypocrisies of his era.
We need to figure out what a case of magical blindness and, tiny conversational eyeballs actually tells us about human behavior.
And the unseen consequences of our everyday actions, too.
Yeah, exactly. And the very strange mechanics of getting a second chance. Okay, let's unpack this.
So, the story introduces us to a man named Feng Dong, who resides in Cheng'an. Now, to understand the gravity of this character, we really have to look at his social standing.
Right, because he's not just some random guy.
No, not at all. He is a recognized scholar in a city that was historically a major capital and a beacon of high culture. In 17th century China, being a scholar wasn't just a profession.
There's a whole identity.
Exactly. It positioned you at the absolute pinnacle of the social and moral hierarchy.
See, I struggle to reconcile that title with his actual behavior, though. I mean, the text calls him a talented scholar, but then immediately details a lifestyle that is undeniably predatory.
It's a huge disconnect.
Right. He lacks basic etiquette, and his main hobby seems to be habitually tailing women on the street. It feels like a massive contradiction to call him talented while he acts like a complete creep.
Well, that contradiction is the central engine of the story. Society often makes the mistake of equating intellectual achievement with moral virtue.
Oh, absolutely. We still do that today.
Exactly. Feng Dong has all the external trappings of a gentleman, the education, the status, the respect of his peers, but internally, he is completely hollow.
His talent is effectively useless because his character is just totally undisciplined.
Yeah. He possesses immense societal privilege, but he suffers from severe moral poverty.
And that moral poverty goes on full display during the inciting incident. The text notes that this happens on the day before the Qingming festival.
Which is really important context.
Right. So Fang is out for a walk in the suburbs, and he spots an incredibly luxurious small carriage. It has red curtains, green-clad servants following behind, and a beautiful maid riding alongside on a pony.
The timing is critical here. The Qingming festival is Tomb Sweeping Day. It's a deeply solemn holiday rooted in respecting your ancestors, observing strict propriety, and honoring family lineage.
It's a time for reverence.
Right, reverence.
Which creates a stark contrast because reverence is the absolute last thing on Fang's mind here. The blind on the carriage is open just enough for him to see a stunning 16-year-old girl inside wearing red makeup.
And he just completely loses all sense of decorum.
Totally loses his mind. He just stares obsessively. He starts tailing them, sometimes riding ahead, sometimes lagging behind, following this carriage for miles.
It's incredibly invasive.
Right. So he's essentially the historical equivalent of a guy relentlessly catcalling from his car, accidentally messing with a supernatural VIP, and refusing to take a hint.
Well, he is treating the world, and specifically the people in it, purely as objects for his own visual consumption. He believes his gaze is a right granted to him by his status.
But he's about to face a massive supernatural stress test.
Oh, yeah. A big one.
Because the girl inside the carriage finally gets fed up. She complains to her maid about the crazy guy constantly staring at them. And the maid aggressively lowers the carriage blind, delivering a very specific warning.
She doesn't hold back.
No, she tells Fang that this young woman is not some local country girl he can just harass. She is the bride of the 7th son of Furong City.
Furong translates to hibiscus, and in classical Chinese folklore, Furong City is a realm of immortals and minor deities.
So she's dropping a major name.
Exactly. The maid is drawing a hard line in the sand. She is telling him that his earthly privilege means absolutely nothing here. This is a clash between human arrogance and a higher, unseen hierarchy.
And she doesn't just leave it at a verbal warning either. She literally scoops up a handful of dirt from the rut in the carriage road and flings it right into Fang's face.
The supernatural revenge thriller begins the second that dirt hits his eyes.
Fang is instantly blinded. When he finally manages to open his eyes, the carriage, the girl, the maid, they've completely vanished into thin air.
And, the punishment perfectly mirrors the crime here. He abused his privilege of sight to violate boundaries, so his sight is immediately confiscated by the very entity he was objectifying.
Yeah, but it goes way beyond a magical lights out situation, though. The medical progression is genuinely gruesome.
It's basically body horror.
Literally. The text says his eyes hurt terribly and tears stream down his face endlessly. Then a thick film starts to grow over his eyes.
Which sounds agonizing.
It gets thicker over several days until it's as thick as a coin. And then, terrifyingly, a spiral, shell-like growth appears on his right eye.
See, we are seeing a physical manifestation of his moral sickness. In classical Chinese thought, the physical body and the spiritual state are deeply intertwined.
So his bad vibes are literally turning into an eye shell.
Essentially, yes. Spiritual corruption naturally manifests as bodily corruption. The text isn't just describing an infection, it's describing his own stubbornness and arrogance calcifying into a physical barrier.
Wow.
And that's why every earthly medicine he tries fails entirely, because this is not a biological disease.
And he realizes that too. He hits rock bottom, trapped in agonizing pain and darkness, with a literal shell crusting over his vision. So he repents.
He has to. He has no other option.
Right. He has someone teach him how to recite the Guanming Jing, which is the Sutra of Light. And for a full year, he does nothing but sit cross-legged, meditating with a rosary.
The choice of the Sutra of Light is highly intentional, by the way. He is a man sitting in absolute physical darkness, chanting for spiritual illumination.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The genre of the story pivots completely.
It does. It's a huge shift.
We go from this creeping scholar to a horror movie medical disaster to a quiet, isolated narrative about Zen-like meditation and intense self-reflection.
And after a year of this, the text notes that all worldly desires were cleansed.
Which is a huge turnaround for a guy who couldn't stop staring at carriages.
Right. What's fascinating here is the function of this profound suffering. From a psychological perspective, this is a radical, forced intervention.
It's not just a timeout.
No, it isn't just a petty punishment from a deity. It is a forced reset of his entire operating system.
Because he literally couldn't stop looking at things he shouldn't, he had to be put in a kind of spiritual quarantine.
That is a perfect way to look at it. It's a sensory deprivation quarantine. Physical blindness becomes an absolute prerequisite for developing internal spiritual sight.
So the blindness was the medicine.
Exactly. Fang had to be entirely severed from the visual, material world in order to heal his mind. He was so distracted by his external desires that he had never once looked inward.
He had to be emptied out completely before he could be rebuilt.
Which brings us to the bizarre rebuilding process.
Yeah, after a year of meditation, his mind is finally quiet enough to notice things. Specifically, he notices something completely absurd happening inside his own head.
He starts hearing tiny voices.
Yes. The text compares the sound to the buzzing of flies. And Fang realizes the voices are coming from inside his own eyes.
The author is literalizing the concept of internal observation in a truly shocking way.
It's so weird. His left eye complains, saying, "It's pitch black, terribly boring."
Like a disgruntled roommate.
Exactly. And then his right eye replies, "Let's go for a stroll to get rid of this stuffiness." He suddenly feels this crawling, itching sensation inside his nose.
Oh, it makes you shudder just thinking about it.
He can feel something physically exit his nostril, leave his face, and then after a while he feels it crawl back into his nose and return to his eye socket.
The extreme specificity of the physiological realism is what makes this so unsettling. The itching, the movement through the nasal cavity, it grounds a wild supernatural concept in a very uncomfortable bodily reality.
When these tiny tenants return from their stroll, Fang hears them giving a status report.
Right, they've been checking out the yard.
Yeah, they say, "We haven't checked the garden in a while. The pearl orchids have withered and died." Fang used to love his orchids. He tended them every day, but since he went blind, he completely neglected them.
The author's choice to use orchids is brilliant symbolism, actually. In classical Chinese culture, the orchid represents the refined, virtuous scholar.
Oh, wow.
It stands for elegance and moral purity. The fact that his orchids have died is a direct environmental reflection of his withered moral state.
That makes so much sense. Fang hears this and asks his wife to go check the garden. She does, and she is shocked to find out that the orchids are indeed totally dead.
She must have been so confused.
Right. She demands to know how a blind man who hasn't left his meditation cushion in a year knows the exact state of the garden. He tells her about the tiny voices, which prompts her to do some investigating of her own.
Leading to one of the most surreal visual images in the entire text.
Imagine you are Fang's wife for a second. You secretly hide in the room to watch your husband. And sure enough, you witness two tiny bean-sized people literally crawl out of his nose.
Just casually walking out.
They fly out the door, and a little while later they come back. You watch them fly arm in arm, returning to his face like bees returning to a hive. This is like a microscopic buddy comedy happening inside a guy's skull.
It really is.
How do you even begin to process that as a spouse? Your husband's eyeballs are taking arm-in-arm strolls through the garden.
It forces us to ask why the pupils manifest this way, you know? If we consider that Fang misused his eyes so egregiously, using them to indulge his basest instincts, it makes sense that the eyes themselves would rebel.
They recognize that he is an unfit driver.
Exactly. They have taken on a life of their own, operating autonomously because he proved entirely unworthy of controlling them.
They unionized against him. But these daily strolls out the nose aren't enough for them anymore. They demand a permanent architectural solution.
Right, they're tired of the commute.
Yeah, the left eye starts complaining that the tunnel out to the nose is too winding and inconvenient. The right eye points out that it can't break through its own wall because it's still covered by that thick, impenetrable spiral shell growth.
So the left eye makes an executive decision.
It says, I'm going to tear open my own door so we can live together.
Notice how Fang's agency is completely gone here. He is just a passenger in his own body, while these microscopic entities remodel his skull.
Fang suddenly feels an agonizing tearing sensation in his left eye socket. He reflexively opens his eyelid, and for the first time in over a year, he sees light.
Which is a huge moment.
She calls his wife over. She examines the eye, and she finds a tiny hole torn right through the thick film. Looking out through that hole is a black pupil shining, as the text describes it, like a split pepper.
That phrase, like a split pepper, is incredibly evocative. It suggests something sharp, vivid, and violently split apart from its original state.
By the next day, the film on the left eye is completely gone, but the anatomy is totally changed. Fang now has double pupils in his left eye, two pupils sharing one iris, while his right eye remains completely blind and covered by the shell.
But here's the catch.
Right, the text explicitly notes that he sees better with this single double-pupiled eye than he ever did when he had two normal eyes.
The double pupil is a loaded symbol in Chinese history. It is a condition called chengteng, and historically it was often associated with great emperors or mythical sages.
Oh, wait, really?
Yeah, it signified extraordinary perception or a grand destiny. Fang has transformed from a morally hollow creep into a man with the visual markers of a sage. He has lost his binocular physical vision, but he has gained a heightened moral clarity.
So what does this all mean? The irony is just so thick here.
It really is.
To actually see clearly and become a decent person, Fang literally had to be blinded, placed in a sensory deprivation quarantine for a year, lose the function of one eye permanently, and have his right pupil migrate across his face to become roommates with his left pupil.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the author provides us with a critical lens right at the end of the text. Pu Songling often included commentary at the end of his stories under the pseudonym The Strange Historian.
Oh, right, the commentary section.
Here, the Strange Historian offers a concluding thought that reframes everything we just analyzed.
The anecdote about the donkey. The historian tells a story about a different man who was walking with his friends and saw a young woman riding a donkey in the distance.
And he decides to be obnoxious.
Trying to show off, he mockingly quotes a poem about a beautiful woman and orders his friends to chase her down. They chase the donkey down, laughing and being obnoxious, only to catch up and realize the young woman on the donkey is the man's own daughter-in-law.
And to understand the weight of that, we have to look at the concept of filial piety and family hierarchy in 17th century China.
It's a very big deal.
The respect required between a father-in-law and a daughter-in-law was absolute. It was a relationship defined by strict boundaries. For him to be caught harassing her in public is a level of social and personal humiliation that is almost impossible to overstate. It destroys his dignity instantly.
The text says the man is devastated. His friends pretend they didn't realize who it was, and the man just stammers out, "This is my eldest son's wife," and everyone awkwardly disperses.
The strange historian connects this directly to Fang Dong. Both of these men were metaphorically blind long before any dirt was thrown in their eyes.
They were blinded by their own arrogance.
Yes, their arrogance, their sense of entitlement, and their complete lack of respect for the humanity of the people around them. The man in the anecdote humiliated himself through his own frivolous actions.
While Fang Dong brought a terrifying supernatural curse upon himself for the exact same reason.
Exactly. It's a parable about self-inflicted blindness. But the historian asks a fascinating question at the end. He asks if the Lord of Furong City, the deity who punished Fang, is actually a bodhisattva in disguise.
A bodhisattva being a figure of deep compassion who helps others achieve enlightenment.
Right. It introduces the concept of compassionate wrath. We spent the first half of the story viewing the supernatural intervention as a brutal, horrific punishment.
Which it was.
It was. But the historian argues that a deity might violently tear apart a person's life, not out of hatred, but as the only effective method of saving their soul. The punishment, as severe and terrifying as it was the only thing capable of piercing Fang's ego.
It wasn't about destruction then. It was about rehabilitation.
It forced him to start anew.
The text ends by noting that Fang became a man known throughout his village for his great virtue. He was cured of his moral blindness, even if it left him with the strangest-looking eye in the province.
It suggests that true vision isn't just about optics. It is about how you perceive your place in the world and your responsibility to others.
Fang had to be violently dismantled to learn how to see properly.
Yes, he really did.
What a wild journey. I mean, we started with an entitled scholar harassing women on the streets of Chang'an.
Then we moved into a visceral body horror nightmare of magical blindness.
Right. Then we took a left turn into a year of silent Zen meditation, only to end up with a microscopic buddy comedy about tiny eyeballs taking walks through a garden.
It's quite the narrative arc.
And it all results in a man with two pupils in one eye who finally learns how to be a good person.
It is a masterclass in using the bizarre to explore the mundane flaws of human nature. The supernatural elements are just tools to crack open the very real issue of how privilege blinds us.